Hey everyone, Tim Higgins here. So we're going to talk about this little concept of request and response. Now, most developers, in fact, I want to go on a limb and say pretty much all developers know what that means, but it can get kind of tricky when you talk about the applications we're going to be demoing. So a request and a response is pretty straightforward. We're going to look at this one little API that I created called get people, okay, or just people. And what happens is in your browser, we're going to make a request. My request is really just enter a refresh. The response that came back very fast is the data that you see here. So that's your request and response. It's very straightforward. Now, in the development world, you'll create, HTTP headers and things like that to deal with it. We're not going to get into that. We're going to keep this very simple. And what you're looking at here is DevTest. But we want to think about your request and response. So if I say create virtual, my RR pairs, that's what these are. Now, we're going to come back to these because this is really, in my opinion, the best practice to do this. So what we're going to do first is there's a product out there called, it's free, Visual Studio Code. This is what it looks like. You can download it. It will run on Mac. It will run on Linux. It's a really cool free app. I don't use it as much because I use Visual Studio itself. But this has a really good plugin. If you go over to your extensions, you can download this REST client extension. And it's really easy to find. You just type in a REST client. And then it just gives you this little panel right here. And notice it's an HTTP. Now, before you do that, you have to create a new file and you have to create a new folder. Here I have a folder on my desktop that I'll just delete. And then you create the file. Now here, all I typed in is get and this API. Okay. And I probably typed in this comment. But this rest of this stuff was given to me by the code. Now, if I hit enter, here, this is my request. This is my response. It's really that simple. All this info right here is what we call response headers. This is response data. Okay, and if you notice, it's just an array of JSON data. Now, sadly, this is not good enough. So it's a good start if you want to see what your API was and to test it. But one of the easiest ways is if you have DevTest, which I'm going to assume you are, because that's why you want to build these, then you can go to API test. And in here, this can get kind of tricky. Let's create a new project, just so we don't muck up what we have. We'll call this create RR pairs. That's fine. Okay. And close. We'll change our project. Okay. Now in here, this can get kind of tricky, but what we're going to do is we're going to say people, because we're going to get people data. My project, let's go ahead and point it to our create RR pairs. Now the base URL can get kind of tricky because down here you have resource path. Now a base URL is kind of what you would expect. Where's my browser? The base URL is going to be up to here, okay, with your protocol, which in our case is HTTP. That's the base URL. Now down here I'm doing a REST client. I'm using the method of get, and then here it wants a resource path. If you're not sure what the resource path is, another great tool you can use is API Strong. Now, I have videos on API Strong as well, but you can use the free version. Click here. It keeps a history. So here's my people. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit send. And what we call, I call it resource path. Most people call it an absolute URL. That is this piece right here. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and save it. Now, with API Strong, this gives me my data based off my request and my response. This is pretty much how it works. So, start time, end time, my port. I'm not going to get in detail of how this works because, like I said, there's videos out there, and this is not what we're focused on. But that was my request, and then this is my response information. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and jump back over here and put that right there. So again, this would be your absolute path. Here it's called a resource path. And really, it's just, if you pay attention, let's close this and let's go ahead and open. It's really just concatenating what you've got. So this is our base URL. And then the request, it says, hey, once I get that, what do you do then? So then you're going to hit this. Now, in a lot of places you can move the API up here, and this would just be a list of your methods. Okay. I don't think it works in here, though. I think it really wants it separated. But let's go ahead and run this. Don't need anything else, name. I don't need description, blah, 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 blah. We'll scroll down, create and run. Now give this 1 second to run. Okay. It is running as we speak. ignore all these other tests. I don't know if I can filter by just, no, I can do person. It's all good. So patience, because it's a pretty big file, but really we're doing an API test. Now, I'm using the API test to create my response and request files, but here we're truly doing just an API test. So give it a second. And again, that's up here in your create. All right, so it's done. So if I open it up and get the details, let's click on the baseline. And if I click on this very first one, this node, this is my request. So we're going to copy it to a notepad. Okay. And then this other big blob of data is my, you guessed it, my response. I just want to copy it over so we can see it. Now the beautiful thing about Notepad, sometimes this is cumbersome and sometimes it's not. Notice it put it all in one line. That's a good thing in our case, and I'll show you why. If we go back to here, this is our request, and our response is this big blob of JSON. Now, if I wanted to, I could copy this to like beautify JSON or something like that. Just Google it, and it will clean it up for me, right? So, but I don't really need to because I know what it is. Now, let's go back over here. The sad thing is this still isn't good enough. It's close, but it's not good enough to do your services. So now in our pairs, the best thing I like to do is download these. So if I save this, we'll just create a new folder called files. And let's save it in here. And then save this one as well, because that's our request. Now the naming convention is very important for DevTest. Okay, the number 8 is kind of your versioning. So I could have operation 8.8 that tells that DevTest that these files belong together. Okay, and then I've got a request, it's REQ, and then a response, and then the .text. That's very important because that's DevTest naming convention. Okay, so let's try some of this out. So if I say my service, call it API RR. Okay, and now what I want to do is, since I downloaded those files, let me pull those up real quick. Let me close some of the stuff on the other screen. Now, I have another video on how to do this, but I don't show you how to create these files. So let's go ahead and open these files so you can see what they look like. Give me 1 second. Not sure where they're saved. I've got multiple monitors, so let's see if they just saved here. Nope. Collapse everything. Oh, that's right. I'm not thinking. I put them in a folder called files. Let's drag that over. Let's open that up. And let's open this one up. Now, as you can see, this is the request that they're seeing. So we know what we do now is we compare it with ours, okay? So this is the one that we got back. So we know this is correct, okay? My content type is JSON. So what I like to do now is just copy these over, right? Leave my content type, because I know it's JSON. The API key and all that, you don't really need that. Oh, I'm sorry, it is there, so I don't need that anyway. And I don't need a user agent because this is just basic information. So I'm going to pause the video. No, actually, I'm not going to pause the video. Here's one that I used before, and we'll look at it. So we have this information. We have our refer HTTP. Let me go ahead and close this one because it really is just one of those that I downloaded, and I just added this stuff in there. So I added these two. Okay, I know my host, and then that. Okay, and again, if you don't know where I got this, this is inventory. If I went and looked back here, it really was one of these. I'm not sure which one because these all say operation, but one of these is inventory. Oops, that wasn't. Let's see, but the point is you can look at these and get some really good examples, and if these don't work, there's actually examples that come with DevTest, and that's probably what I used was one of those. But again, you get it from right here, okay? So you don't have to go looking for it. But now the point is I've created that. Now the trick with the response file, this is the response, okay? And then in here is the basic information that you would expect. And yes, I'm lying. I did go find this because you can just do a find for REST, and it's installed with DevTest. It's one of their examples, and that's where this came from. Or just take a snapshot of this video. The trick here is your JSON has to be all on one line, okay? Just like when I said, well, it's kind of cumbersome how Notepad did that for me, but it was kind of a blessing at the same time, okay? So here's the Notepad one. So if I grab this, let's see if this works for us. Now, I've never done the complete data. I've only done just one, okay? And then we'll go ahead and save this one. And when I say just one, I only did one row. Or one record. I didn't do the whole thing. So let's go ahead and close these and close this. And don't think this video isn't useful because I didn't use these files, but you can. Okay, I just went inside where DevTest is installed. You'll see examples, and I just grabbed one of those. But the point is, the information I still had to get from testing, and then from there you just bring it over. Here you bring it over, and then from here we'll say continue. And now we're good there, so we'll give it a name. We'll call it test people with RR pairs. I have to give it a different name because you can't have the same name. Notice it picked up the base URL. It picked up the resource path. And it looks just like the other one we did, right? And here it's going to test. Now this test may take a little bit longer because it is more data. But the whole point of this is to create RR pairs. Now, truthfully, I could have built the API test without the RR pair and pretty much get almost the same result. But we need these RR pairs when we migrate, or not migrate, but when we integrate TDM and SV. And that's what we're going to look at next. Let me let this finish, show you what the results is, and then we'll go look at that. Perfect. I was just about to pause the video, but it looks like it came to an end. Baseline, everything's good and clean. We've got our good data here. So, and most importantly is at this point, what I could do is go and just truthfully just keep running this test if I want to, right? So I'm going to monitor tests. It's right there, and I can just keep running this test if I want. There's a lot of good information on these tests. Again, this is not a video about testing, but if you wanted to use DevTest and you wanted to use it for API Strong, then you could, right? Here's my expected results, 200, 200, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so with saying that, I hope this video was somewhat useful. My most important thing is to understand these files, and I'll open them up again so you can do a snapshot if you want to. But again, I kidnapped this file from the examples, and the only thing I added was just the URL paths, right? Everything else was the same. And then I just ran it, and it worked. And again, the biggest thing about the request, now I did the request where I didn't use all this. I really did it like that, and that worked just fine. You have to tell it that you're using HTTP. Version is the lowest version it can go and what your expected results are, which is 200. Then just put your JSON in there, and it will run just fine. Okay. All right. So with saying that, hope this was useful, and stay tuned. We'll jump on the next video here shortly.